I had created an alternate ending in my head and fully believed it 100% to the point that I literally thought that I was right and the book was wrong. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I just wanted to do a cute little tag that I saw floating around on Instagram. And I couldn't really find like the original. No, that's a lie. I did find the original, but I found a couple of different versions that combined the original with the kind of spin-off of it, and it's all a jumbled mess. So I will link below a couple of different sources that I found to kind of compile this list of questions for the spring cleaning book tag. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the format of this tag is to kind of talk about different things you do during spring cleaning and talk about different books or different bookish things as we go. So the first question is the struggle to begin. A book you're struggling to begin because of its size. So this won't be a surprise to anyone if you've watched any of my videos, but I am petrified of big books, and usually there is a lot of fear and reluctance and hesitation to start a big book. Whenever I pick up a big book, maybe it sounds exciting, maybe it sounds interesting, but it just sits on my shelf for a long time, and it takes some time, some effort, some convincing myself in order to conquer said book. So this is a book that Molly over on Literary Overflow on Instagram recommended as part of a tarot and book recommendation series that she did. And this was the one for the Empress, I believe, which is a tarot card that I really resonate with. So I wanted to pick this one up, and I got it a while ago and never read it because it is huge. It is the longest book on my shelves, and that is Ducks Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann. This is over 1,000 pages of basically stream of consciousness, wall-to-wall text on these pages, with basically no punctuation or separation between the sentence, etc. So it's going to be a lot. So this book basically details a mother's existence. They live in Ohio? Yeah, Ohio. And it's just her rambling, all of her thoughts, the connections she makes throughout her days, all of the tedium of her day-to-day life. And it sounds really, really fascinating and something to really study and dive into, but it's a book that I really struggled to start and have not been able to start. So that is the one that is probably the most challenging and fits the struggling to begin prompt to a T. Question number 2, organizing the closet, the way your shelf is organized. So I'm currently not sitting in front of my shelves, but there's a shelf over there and there's a shelf over there, and they're organized in different ways. I am somebody who reorganizes my shelves all the time. My fiance makes fun of me for it constantly because he's always like, how is it organized now? Is it by color? 2 weeks ago it was by author, so what's happening now? And he really calls me out on that because I do it a lot. But the method that I've been using for a while now and seems to work pretty well is on that shelf, it is alphabetical by last name, and all of those are fiction books. So the only exception is that my top shelf, which I have talked about in a recent video, I did a translated literature bookshelf tour, which I will put a link to above and below in the description. But the top shelf is basically all of my translated books, and it is organized by country of origin / language of origin. And then the rest of that shelf is just last name, alphabetical. If I have a couple of books by the same author, I do alphabetical by first letter of the title. So I have a system in place. I really like having the whole shelf over there dedicated to fiction books because before I really started collecting a lot of books and sort of dove into the book buying experience, I had a jumbled mess of different kinds of books on my main shelf, and I really only had one bookshelf at the time. And I just didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like the fact that everything was all mixed up together. So I do really like that setup, and I also am not somebody who is interested in doing a separation of TBR and read books because that stresses me out, and seeing how many unread books I have on a shelf would just make me cry. So I don't organize it that way. As for this shelf, it is more chaotic. This kind of reminds me of my old shelf situation, which was, like I said, a little chaotic, a little crazy. So I've actually done a bookshelf tour somewhat recently, and I will link that above in the cards and below in the description so you can kind of get a more detailed view of all of my bookshelves, my setup, the books I own, etc. But the general gist of this shelf is that the top row is my Shirley Jackson collection, my Wings of Fire collection is on the second row, and then I have children's YA, nonfiction, memoirs, and graphic novels, and essay collections, and basically everything that's not fiction. So it's a jumbled mess. I hope that when I move and I actually have a better bookshelf set up, that I can make it more organized and pretty. But for now, that's the shelf that I don't film in front of and I don't really look at as much because I don't pull from it as often, which I probably should. But that is a very rambling answer to question number 2. That is how I organize my bookshelves. That is the way that I found works for me right now until I move and have a different setup. So this is what works for me for now. And yeah, moving right along to question number 3, which is opening the windows and letting in fresh air. A book that is light and refreshing. So this is a book that Allison Pages talked about on her YouTube channel and Instagram, and it sounded very sweet and fun and light, even though it does kind of talk about chronic pain and chronic illness. Not kind of, it really does talk about that a lot, but it's not a sad book. It does have a very happy kind of refreshing aura around it, if that makes sense. And that is The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating by Elizabeth Tova Bailey. So like I said, this is about a woman with chronic illness, and it's kind of undiagnosable and unexplainable during the period that she, talks about in this sort of memoir. And she combines that with some scientific evidence, studies, etc. about wild snails. So basically, a friend of hers gave her a snail, and it becomes her companion as she is bedridden, and she makes a lot of observations about the snail. She appreciates the snail. She thinks about human existence and snail existence and how they coexist, etc. So it's a very fun, sweet book, but it also brings up some deeper topics. So it is a very refreshing read, I think, overall, especially for someone who reads a lot of sad shit and things that are traumatizing and all of that. So reading something that has kind of a more positive, light twist to it, or at least is kind of fun and silly with the snail situation, it was very refreshing for me. All right, moving right along. Question number 4 is clean out the kitchen cupboards. Your favorite book related to food. So I'll be honest, I haven't read a ton of specifically food related books. I can think of a few, such as Close to Famous, which was a children's book that was one of my favorites. I've read Bloom, which is a graphic novel. I really want to read Sita's Kitchen, which, like I said, I haven't read yet, but that's a food related one. But other than that, there aren't a ton except for Sourdough by Robin Sloan. I've talked about this one extensively. It's a favorite of mine. I've reread it, and it is just so good. It basically follows a woman named Lois who works at a robot factory. She's very tech savvy, and as is common among her friends and coworkers, she doesn't really eat well. She eats something called slurry, which is just a nutrient paste, and that's what everyone at her factory eats. Until she stumbles across a soup and sourdough restaurant, which just sort of takes over her life, and she ends up getting gifted with a sourdough starter. And she has to figure out how to use it, how to make it into potentially a business, and she goes on all of these crazy adventures because of the sourdough starter, which is such an amazing, fun, silly concept, and it definitely feels like magical realism / urban fantasy. There's definitely some fantastical elements, but a lot of it is based in reality, and it's just a really fun book. I haven't read any other food kind of related book that is as much fun, as whimsical, as sweet, as just overall wonderful. So definitely recommend Sourdough if you're interested in food related books, and if you're interested in sourdough, this got me to make sourdough bread. So if you're interested in doing that, definitely pick this one up because you're gonna wanna bake some bread. So let me just apologize for the changing of the light. I am once again sitting by my window because it is dark and rainy and I'm trying to get some light in here, but the lighting situation keeps changing. So I'm sorry, I'm doing my best. It's also really hot in here, so we're gonna take this off. Question number 5 is dust the shelves. What's the 5th book on your shelf? I'm going to do this on the main shelf. I will be right back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Die My Love. It's not in focus. Hello. Die My Love by Ariana Harwicks. So that is the 5th book on my main bookshelf. Question number 6, washing the sheets. A book with a scene you wish you could rewrite. So this book is a controversial one, but it's The Pisces by Melissa Broder. I fucking love this book. It is so weird. It is so strange and gross at times, but I love it. I've read it twice. And to keep this part spoiler free, the ending, I didn't like it at all. I wish I could rewrite the ending of this book. Funny story, actually the first time I read it, I understood the ending, moved on, then I reread the book, and I genuinely created a different ending in my mind, and I believed it so much that when I got to the end of the book for the second time, I thought I read a different version. I had created an alternate ending in my head and fully believed it 100% to the point that I literally thought that I was right and the book was wrong. That's how much this ending sucks. That's how much I want to change this ending. And I'm sorry if you haven't read this and you are planning on reading this now, because I've probably ruined the ending for you, but maybe you'll have a different opinion than me. Just give it a try anyway. I'm gonna give some spoilers now for the Pisces to talk about the ending, so if you don't want to hear that, skip to this time for the next question. So basically what I had in my head was that she walks into the ocean and she basically dies, drowns with the merman. That is not what happens. She decides to get her shit together at the end and walks away from him. And as much as that's like the right ending for her, right? Like she's gonna go get some help. She's going to fix herself. She's gonna be a girl boss instead of a sad girl. That's great, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted her to die. I wanted her to drown. I wanted her to go into the ocean with a merman. Am I just a psycho? I don't know. Tell me if you agree if you've read this book, because oh my god, I literally created an ending in which she died and drowned and walked into the ocean. I don't know why. I don't know what happened in my brain to make me think that, but that's what happened. And I wish that that was the case. So if you read this and you felt the same, let me know. If you felt like the ending was good, let me know. Let's talk about it. So that is question number 6, the Pisces. Moving right along to number 7, we have throwing out unnecessary knickknacks. A book in a series you thought was unnecessary. So this book isn't necessarily in the main series, but I do think it's unnecessary and it is part of the series in a way. And that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is a prequel, if you will, to the Hunger Games series, and it was not all that I hoped it would be. I definitely thought that it was a fun read. I believe it came out in the summer of 2020, and at that point I was just so desperate to read something fun because 2020 sucked, and I was really not doing much but reading because work was not happening and there was really nothing else to do and I was cooped up at home. So yes, I had fun reading this book and I still enjoyed it because it was a fun story in a way, but I found it to be completely unnecessary, and when I think about it retroactively, I just feel like it wasn't that great. It was kind of a fun experience for quarantine, but it wasn't a book that I want to reread. It's not a book that I particularly love. And I thought it was unnecessary because why do we need to know about President Snow? Why do we need to empathize for President Snow? He's horrible and I don't understand the need to empathize with him. So The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, unnecessary. All right, second to last question, question number 8. Reaching to Dust the Fan, a book that tried too hard to relay a certain message. So my pick for this one was A Mouthful of Air by Amy Koppelman. So this is a tough one to talk about because it is and potentially could be very triggering for some people. It upset me. The ending was really, really traumatizing to me. Serious trigger warning for depression, suicidal ideations, child death. Definitely look up trigger warnings if you want to read this. So I've read a lot of books about sad girls, quote unquote, or women with mental illness and women who are struggling. And I just felt like this one was so just, I don't want to say over the top because I know people's lives are like this and these kind of things happen to people, but it was just a lot. Basically, the idea is that this young woman, she has a young child and she is really dealing with some serious, maybe postpartum depression, maybe just general depression, but she tried to commit suicide and survived. And now she's trying to recover, move on with her life. And then some pretty crazy things happen after that, and it's really intense and upsetting. The point of this book, I guess, is to really showcase how difficult and isolating motherhood can be, especially if you're predisposed to depression and anxiety. So I understand what it was trying to achieve, and I don't want to come off as insensitive to that. But I think that there are ways to do it that aren't quite so traumatic or quite so aggressive in trying to get a point across, because there was no relief. There was no, I don't know how to describe it. I just felt like it was too much, and I thought that it really tried to drive home this point that motherhood can be depressing and that it can be really hard. For me personally, everything up until the ending I could handle, but the ending was too much, and I just didn't think that it was necessary, and I didn't think that it was productive. This is just my opinion. If you read this book and you found it to be not over the top or not trying too hard to push a certain narrative, or however you felt about it, I don't have the experiences that this woman is going through, so I don't really know if it is entirely accurate. I know that people have experiences like this, but as a reader, purely based on my enjoyment of the book and my experience reading the book, which is totally a separate issue from how representative it is of real life, I found it to be trying too hard to drive the point home, and I found it to be traumatic and upsetting and just too much. So I'm going to be unhauling this book, actually. I talked about that in a recent video. It's just too much for me, and I think it was just trying a little too hard, and I'm repeating myself and rambling, but it's just not a book for me. So if you read this one, please write a comment about how you felt about it, because I really would like to talk to some people about it and see if you guys have similar opinions or similar experiences. Anyway, that is question 8. And finally, we have question number 9, which is Polishing Doorknobs, a book that has a clean finish. I do really love these questions and how the cleaning things are brought into the questions. It's great. So for this one, I chose Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. This was my second favorite book of 2021. I loved this book so much. So this is set in Nigeria, and it follows a woman who I struggle to pronounce her name, but I think it's Yahide? I'm not sure. She can't get pregnant, and basically her mother-in-law brings a new woman into their house and says, you have to have a child by this woman now. So it's about those family dynamics. It's about expectations for women in Nigeria specifically. So really it's just about Yahide's struggle with not being a mother and then being a mother, and child loss, and a bunch of crazy things that happen. Honestly, this book is so much more than what the back says. The back is such a cursory glance at what happens, and all of the things that happen on the back happen like within the first little bit of the book, and all of this is just so much. But what I loved about this is that the author did an incredible job of tying it together at the end, making it satisfying, and making all of the trauma and sadness throughout the book worth it, because without spoiling it, there are some serious sad moments. There is several moments of child loss and such grief and sadness and separation from the family. There's just so much that happens, and Adebayo does a really great job of tying it all together, making it, like I said, very satisfying at the end. We don't have all the answers ever, but we do have a lot of answers, and we have peace, and we have families reunited, and general happiness and acceptance, and it's just a really beautiful ending and just a wonderful book overall, but specifically a very clean ending, a very tied together ending, if you will. So that is the spring cleaning book tag. I haven't done a book tag in a while, so this was pretty fun. I also just wanted to do something a little bit more casual and a little bit more rambly, because it's kind of fun sometimes. So if you want to follow along, I will post all of the questions in the description below, and you can follow along in the comments, or if you post on Instagram, tag me with @pagesinperpetuity so we can see each other's answers. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.